Let's talk about this a little bit further in the context of doing actual deals here. Okay. This is what I mean about where it's going to get a little bit tedious, and hopefully you can, listen to me as clearly as possible, because some of the verbiage I'm going to use is really important. So I'm going to try to accentuate it. So this paragraph B relates to the owner financing section of our purchase and sale agreement when we have owner financing. So let's assume that we did a $250,000 wraparound mortgage, meaning we took over a loan and we wrapped around that underlying loan. Instead of taking the underlying loan sub 2 and then stacking the additional financing on top of it, we just wrapped the whole thing into one. That's typically what is done because it's simpler. And a lot of times the seller wants it all wrapped into one, especially if they have an attorney. They still have the ability to get the property back, but they want to have the ability to, be in a similar position as a bank is. So $250,000 wraparound mortgage is the example here. We've got a payment of $1,925. They want a 6-year balloon, meaning maybe they have 20 some years left on the underlying loan. The underlying loan is 200, but we've got them to agree that, hey, you've got 50 grand of equity. Don't you just want the debt relief? No, I want my 50 grand. Okay, well, we'll take over the 200 and then we will create a note for the 50. We'll just wrap it all into one at 250,000. We get them to agree that the payment is going to be $1,925, which is what the existing payment is on the 200. So how's that going to work? Because we owe 250, but the underlying loan is 200 and has a payment in 1925. We don't want to pay more than 1925 because maybe we can't rent it for more than that. Can you see where that would be a scenario that presents itself fairly commonly? So let's talk about how we would fill this out. And folks, I realize, again, I just want to reiterate, if your head is spinning on some of this stuff, you don't really get into this detail of conversation with the seller. It's really, what am I going to get per month? And then you end up sending them the agreement, and sometimes this stuff comes out if they do like an attorney review, and then we can deal with it based on what they come back with. But I don't want your head to be spinning so much that you lose your focus and concentration on the most important thing, which is just the art of negotiating the deal itself. Learn if they're open to monthly payments, learn what the mortgage balance is, then learn price, monthly, duration, and down. That's it. That's the whole business right there. Okay, this contracting stuff, you're going to get help with. Or you can listen back to these tapes and do it yourself. A lot of people do this just fine. So here's the way this will work. $250,000 wrap. There's an underlying loan of 200, and the total payment on this is going to be $1,925. We simply fill in, the way this is going to be paid is $1,925 a month per month for 72 months. Why 72 months? Because we said there's a 6-year balloon payment. Okay. So after that period, 72 months, that's 6 years, a balloon payment will, we check this box, apply, at which time the entire mortgage payoff amount will be due and payable, whatever's left on this wraparound mortgage at that time. The payment is including taxes and insurance, and the remainder of the payment is going to go not to principal and interest according to the underlying mortgage loans amortization schedule, but principal and interest to be determined. And let me explain why. Privilege of prepayment does apply, and the loan, because we're buying, is not due on sale. So this checkbox right here where it says principal and interest to be determined is for this reason. Now, you might not get this. Hopefully you can, and I'll explain why, and I think you're all going to understand why. This word right here is the key word, amount, not rate. Notice I didn't say rate. Okay, if I did have rate, it would be principal and interest according to the underlying mortgage loans amortization schedule. But I'm talking about the amount of interest. That means the actual dollars that are paid out of this 1925 on the 200 grand. The amount of interest on the monthly note payment to the seller equals the amount of monthly interest on the underlying loan. Now, why would I do that? Think for a second. The reason is because that means that the rest of the money goes towards principal. Well, the taxes and insurance are taken out. The amount of interest on the 250 is the same that's being paid to on the 200. So that means the rest of the payment is going to the principal on the 250, which means what? Which means there is no interest on the $50,000 difference between the 250 and the 200. So you're getting an interest-free loan on this extra 50 grand. If we match up the interest on the $250,000 loan in terms of the amount that's being paid on the $200,000 loan, then that means the rest of the payment is all going towards this additional principal, which is the difference between 250 and 200, which is 50 grand. That's the way that works. Okay, let's look at it a little bit different way. Let's say there's a $300,000 first, and we get them to agree that, meaning it's a free and clear house, and they've agreed to take $300,000 of financing, and that payment is going to be $1,925, principal, interest, taxes, insurance until paid in full. So this works like this: $1,925 until paid in full, right? So per month is a star. And at the star, we're going to say, okay, out of that $1,925, taxes and insurance have to be paid first. And then the rest of the payment balance is going to be applied into principal until paid in full. So if someone's trying to leave something for their kids at the end of their life or something like that, and they don't want them to get all the money at once, and they don't want the house to be sold, where $50,000 is going to a realtor or something like that with fees and, fix up and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, this guy's going to give me 300 grand. He's going to pay me 1925. The taxes and insurance are covered in that. And then the rest of that money comes in month after month after month until the 300 grand is gone. Boy, I can feel much better about, going to meet my maker and making sure my kids have some kind of an annuity. We just bought this house with no interest and direct principal reduction payment, $1,925 a month until paid in full. Obviously, out of the $1,925, we've got to pay the taxes and insurance, and the remainder of that is going to be what you get each month. And then the same kinds of things here. Payment does include the taxes and insurance. The remainder goes directly to principal, like I just said. We could prepay it if we wanted to, and the loan is not due on sale. That's the way we ideally want to deal with a free and clear property. Are you going to get it like this every time? No. But when you can, you take it. If you can't, you negotiate it. They might say, well, I wanted $1,925 for me. You got to pay the taxes and insurance on top of that. It still might be a great deal. Somebody else might say, no, the $1,925 is all interest, no principal. I want you to have an incentive to refinance this thing off so I can get my 300. In which case you change it to interest only, maybe. I mean, if you could rent the thing for $3,500, it's probably worth it, even if you're getting no principal reduction paid on. This is why we need to know every single one of these metrics in order to structure a deal. Y'all with me? Let's look at another example. Let's say we've got a $600,000 wraparound mortgage. The payment is $2,800, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Seller does not want to wait more than 3 years. They've got an underlying loan that they want paid off. It's 400 grand on it, and it's got principal, interest, taxes, insurance payments at 2,200. So unlike that first example, we've got an underlying loan that is paid at 2,200. And so we say to the seller, well, we'll do a $600,000 wrap, but we want our payment to equal what you're paying now. And they're like, no, because I should be able to get way more than that. Well, are you trying to get, like monthly cash flow on this? Or are you trying to get the 600 grand? I'm trying to get you the 600 grand. So the lower the payment, the better. I know what you're trying to do, and I don't care what you're trying to do. You're going to have to pay a little bit on top of that 2,200 to make it worth my while. Well, what's the best you can do? And then we land at 2,800. So we land at 2,800 on a $600,000 deal with underlying financing of 400 grand. And that underlying financing is paid at 2,200 a month. Okay. Now, very, very similar to what we just described a couple of slides ago. The buyer, the buyer, we're going to pay the seller $2,800 a month for 3 years. After that 3 years, a balloon payment applies where the entire mortgage payoff amount is due and is payable. This payment of $2,800 does include taxes and insurance, probably because it's included within this $2,200. But the payment does include the taxes and insurance. And again, principal and interest needs to be determined. Privilege or prepayment applies, and the loan's not due on sale. Note the underlined word amount. Do y'all remember why we do it like this? The amount of interest paid on the monthly note payment to the seller will equal that on the underlying loan, with taxes and insurance being deducted and the remainder being applied to principal. So what that means is, yes, we're taking over this $400,000 loan. Yes, we owe the seller an additional $200, but if we just wrapped this, let's say we even did it at an interest rate that was similar to the underlying $400. Well, now we're paying interest on $600,000, which means you're not going to get very much debt paid on at $2,800 a month. We could figure that out on a calculator. However, the way I have it structured, because the amount of interest is the exact same on the 600 as it is on the 400, and the rest goes to principal after taxes and insurance are paid. That means this 200 grand, yeah, we are paying 600 a month, right? Difference between 2,800 and 2,200, we're paying 600 a month on this, but it's all coming right off the extra 200. It's all coming right off the balance. So it's like putting the money in the bank. You're not getting any interest on it, but you're putting it right into the house. You're not paying any interest on it. This is why we try to structure these deals this way. And this is why when people say don't do wraps when you buy, they don't know what they're talking about, or they just haven't considered that I know why they say to not do wraps when you buy, but not everybody's going to let you take over their property just straight up subject to. You might have to wrap it, but you can get the same effect of taking over the property sub to and then getting an interest-free loan on the difference if you learn how to do this properly. So if you were to do it the other way, you wouldn't have built up much equity on the 200. But if you do it my way, 600 a month, the difference between 2,800 and 2,200, which is what, 7,200 a year for 3 years, that's an extra 21 grand in your pocket for flapping your lips just a little bit longer, for learning how to do these contracts the right way and sending them the right way. If you all go back and have questions on this, I do not mind answering these. I know this gets to be complicated, and most of the time I can cure whatever's spinning in your brain, making you confused on it, because people do get confused on this stuff. All right, let's look at another one. $1 million first mortgage. Payment is $3,000. It's going to be interest only, right? 4-year balloon or 48 months. The taxes are $12,000 per year, which is $1,000 a month, right? Insurance is $6,000 a year, which is $500 a month, right? 1,000 plus 500 is 1,500, isn't it? But the seller wants to escrow and collect that within their payment. Why? Because they're savvy. They've got $1 million house. They don't want to trust you to pay the taxes and insurance. They want to know that it's being paid. They want to protect their interest. They know they're going to make payment. They want it as part of their payment. And I probably agree to that. That's how we go from 3,000 interest only to 4,500. How do we get to 4,500? Taxes are 12,000 a year. So I got to put 1,000 up a month. Insurance is 6,000 a year. So I got to put 500 a month. So there's 1,500 a month in the kitty. First Title, Chicago Title, whoever, they pay the taxes, pay the insurance out of that kitty, out of that escrow account, okay? Or I'm sending 4,500 directly to the seller, and the seller's gonna pay the taxes and insurance as the financer on my behalf, just the way the bank does when you take out a normal bank loan. So it's 4,500 a month for 4 years, and after this period, a balloon payment is gonna apply. Well, let's think about this for a second. What is our balloon payment gonna be in 48 months? Hint. Why? We weren't able to negotiate any principal reduction. Do I care? I'm not going to lose sleep over it. If I can rent the place for $6,000 to a lease option buyer, pick up 100 grand down, even if I could do it for 5 grand, I got 500 a month that I'm picking up, and I picked up 100 grand deposit, and I probably sold it for 1.1 something. It's all what you can negotiate. Some will, some won't. We do the best we can and consummate the deals that we want to be involved in. So the payment, it does include taxes and insurance, as I talked about, right? 1,000 a month, 500 a month on the insurance, which is 12,000 a year, 6,000 a year divided by 12, 1,500 plus 3,000, 4,500. So that payment does include the taxes and the insurance, but the remainder of the payment goes towards interest. The other 3 grand goes towards interest. And that interest rate is 3.6. Why is it 3.6? Well, 3,000 times 12 is 36,000. 36,000 yield on 1 million is 3.6%. The privilege of prepayment does apply, and the loan is not due on sale. And then we simply indicate that the seller will escrow, because we don't want them keeping the 4,500 and not paying, the taxes and insurance. The insurance is in our name, by the way, because we bought the house, but they still have to pay the bill on it. Just not our personal name, our entity's name. So the seller will escrow 1/12 of the taxes and the insurance and provide proof of payment to the buyer annually. Make sure it got paid. So we write that in there. That's the way you would structure that kind of a deal.